All right, guys. Welcome. My name is George Castellans. We're going to be doing a training today about buyer consultations. As you guys might know, the market's starting to turn a little bit towards having strong buyers being like the preferable thing. I don't really think that we're fully there yet, but regardless, anybody who's working with a buyer should have a good strategy for working with buyers, just the same way that we all have listing presentations when we go to listing appointments. We should be having buyer consultation material or at least a game plan. So I'm going to share with you guys kind of what I do, why I do it, and how I do it. I have an agenda that I usually present them with, and I break everything out right from the beginning. And I take this opportunity to, one, give information, which in turn means value. And that's what we should all be doing when we're talking with any client, buyer, seller, investor, is giving value. But the second thing is building that rapport. So you guys know that there's a saying in real estate, buyers are liars. And that saying comes because a lot of times you'll have some buyers that will tell you they're not working with somebody, or, you spend time trying to show them houses and get really, give some time and energy into them and money, with gas and tolls and everything. And they end up working with somebody else sometimes. So I'm sure this has happened to everybody at least once. If it hasn't happened, do expect it, because that is unfortunately the nature of sometimes with buyers. But I'll tell you that once I implemented this strategy, that hasn't happened to me. It happened to me like once, then it happened to me a second time, and I'm like, wow, like, what's going on? And it just comes down to building that rapport. It comes down to having that relationship with the buyer that sometimes we don't take the time. Usually we get a lead and they want to see a house. We might just schedule the appointment, go and show it, and then we start showing. But then let's say they go to an open house and that realtor poaches them at that open house because maybe you never had these conversations with them. So this whole thing, the buyer consultation, is designed to really circumvent that problem so that it doesn't happen again. You guys know that this is a people business, right? We deal with people. And when it's a people business, if you have that trust and rapport with the client, you typically are successful at retaining them as your client. So this is what we aim to do. We have a buyer consultation meeting with them. I have a quick agenda. Typically, I try to do this in congruence with the pre-approval appointment. So if I have a lender that I'm working with, I ask them to come in person and we can really get both things done. So the first item on the agenda is usually the collection of the documents for pre-approval. Now, today, most people are doing this virtually, where they're just asking, hey, upload the documents here or email them to me or whatever. That's fine. If you already have the client that has a pre-approval, you don't need to do this part. But I do find that it helps, because later on in the presentation, we go into numbers, and that's where I really dive into it and where I really show my worth to them. The second step, I review the transaction steps. So I have a buyer's guide that I have here. I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to kind of walk through it, and I'm going to give you guys a copy of it. So that way we can kind of help you get some material. These are things that I myself have developed over the years, but I'm going to give you guys copies of it, and we can have it branded for you as well. So I'll help you guys. That way you have your own packet now. The next thing is we ask some questions about the process and steps. The main thing you want to do, like I said, is provide value. So if they have questions and you're able to answer them, that's going to be a big step for you. The other item that we talk about is the money, right? I find that a lot of agents don't talk to their clients about money right from the beginning. They might ask them how much you have to put down, but most agents don't talk about what that monthly payment looks like for them and what those closing costs are. Every time I hear somebody ask, like, hey, what are the closing costs? I've heard agents say everything from like, oh, between 10 to 15,000, or like 3% or 4% of the purchase price. They give ballparks. I give a ballpark, but I also give a breakdown when I sit down with them. And this makes them feel a lot more comfortable, because before they find the house, they already understand the finances. And as agents, we have to put the best interest of our clients in front of us. So I believe that's in the best interest of the client to know the cost, the financial burden that they're taking on in the beginning of the transaction, not once they fall in love with a house, right? It's not like, hey, you're in love with this house, now here's the bill, right? That's just my mentality. That's the way I like to operate. I'm sure a lot of people would agree that that's the right way to do it. Seller's concession is a conversation that obviously, I mean, you can see how old this packet is. It's probably like 4 years old. Seller's concessions was a thing. Right now it hasn't been, but I think it will start again. So this is the whole point of going back to basics. These things that happened before will happen again. It's all a cycle, right? We've rode this wave where it's been crazy. Now we're coming back to like a normal market. So I talked to him about seller's concession after I discussed the costs. And then the final thing I talk about with them is the home search and what are their next steps. So this helps me have an agenda right in front of them. Here's what we're going to do. Here's an outline. Why? Because a lot of realtors, we can go on and on, right? We talk every single day. So we could go on and really spend a lot of time with them. You want to be efficient, but you also want to get the information out. So having an agenda really helps you keep yourself focused. So that's where we're starting at. For the transaction steps, I go to our buyer's guide. So I'm going to show you guys my buyer's guide. Again, I'll help you brand this in your own name and your own photography, your own logos, whatever you want. I can help you do this. Maybe we'll do like a follow-up workshop where we actually work through a consultation packet. And then we could also add whatever things you guys want. I'll show you how to do that. I'll provide you a Word document. You can edit it and then save it as a PDF. I always tell people save these things as PDFs. You don't really want to email them to your clients, right? Because maybe it just gets sent around. But when you do have it as a PDF, you don't mess up the formats. So on the Word doc, you can easily move things around. On a PDF, they're usually pretty set. So this is my first time home buyer's guide. I do tell people, even if you're a first time home buyer, this packet could be helpful. It's just not the whole thing will pertain to them. So when we scroll down a little bit, you'll see the table of contents. I jumped a bunch of stuff. So table of contents, again, I just try to have everything organized and just say like, this is the page where you find this is the other page. And then I do a little cover letter pretty much. And it's just like me saying, I want to assist you with the purchase of your home. I prepared this guide for you. I want to provide this guide for you. And this is essentially my commitment to you is I'm going to be representing you. I'm thrilled to do it, right? Some nice words. All honesty, of course. And then I just signed it at the bottom, just like a quick cover letter, right? I'll help you guys. You could use the same stuff I use, or if you want to modify it yourself, you can. And then I put a little bit of a resume. So here it says, what makes me a unique realtor, right? So I talk about my background, my college education, what I do, and what sets me apart. I talk about my communication, my marketing, all that type of stuff. For each one of you guys, it might be different. I don't care if you did, if you worked at a cell phone store, like you've been in sales. So you just say that my background in sales has helped, right? Or let's say you worked at a wholesale club and you were in customer service. I've been in customer service for X amount of years. You want to make yourself sound really legit. Even if you're a newer agent, you can use all types of backgrounds and experiences to help yourself sound like a agent that's been around for a bit. So I'll help you guys with the wording of stuff, and whatever your individual backgrounds, I can help you kind of word it properly. I put in there my education, and I have obviously my degree, but then I have my real estate license is on there because people don't know you have to go to school for that. My broker's license is on there, and different things that I do, land use, zoning certificates. So just a little bit about myself. And again, your packet could be a little different. I'll help you guys craft that. And then organizations and involvement. This gives you some depth. It doesn't matter what you do. Let's say you do, some community service for a soup kitchen. That gives you some qualities that the client might like. You're caring, you give back. Let's say you're part of a Rotary Club or whatever you're a part of. Include that in your activities, because a lot of times that builds those kind of like, they get to know you as a person and not just somebody who's selling you something, right? That's kind of like basics of that agency and that relationship. So here I have that I'm obviously a member of the Association of Realtors. And what does that mean? A lot of people don't know what it is to be a realtor, but essentially you could be a real estate agent without being a realtor, right? But if you're a realtor, that means that you're committed to a code of ethics and you have a high level of professionalism. So I think that that's something that I know it's kind of like gamey and thrown around. For us, it might seem like second nature, but to clients, they don't know that. They don't know that somebody could be an agent and not a realtor, right? So whatever content you could, like, look, this is me. This is what I do. The more stuff you give them, the better. Obviously, I have some background here in land use. So I have my own stuff on here. And then I am part of a scholarship committee. So I have that in here just to kind of give them some tie to my background, an organization that I helped found called Hispanos Unidos. So I do some political and civic engagement, and then recognitions of note. So for all of you who are Circle of Excellence winners, you put that on there. So I have all the years that I've won my Circle of Excellence, and I received a special certificate of recognition from the US Congress, which to me was very important. And I just put that on there as like another kind of like cherry on top, like this is who I am as a person. So this part is kind of like your resume, because in reality, they're kind of hiring you, right? So you want them to know what are your qualifications, and everybody's is going to be a little different. I will help you put yours together. The next part I talk about is like, look, let's work together. One of the main things in any relationship ever, any interpersonal relationship, is expectations, right? We got to set expectations from each other. So what can you expect from me and what will I expect from you? Obviously, the list of what you can expect from me should be longer than what you expect from them. But you want to listen to their needs and desires. That's hugely important because we're not really just opening doors for people. We're trying to place them with the right home. This market last 2 years has been crazy because you're just trying to get them whatever you can. It's been a madhouse trying to get them a property. But in reality, as an agent, what you want to do is you want to identify their needs and try to find them and place them in something that fills those needs. So I think, again, back to basics, that's one of those basic components of what we do as realtors. And then we keep them apprised of market behavior. So one of the things I do with my clients, like when we saw those interest rates spike up, I called every single one of my clients. Hey, I don't know if you know, but the rates just went up. Like, let's talk to your lender. Let's run a pre-approval again and see what that number comes out to. Anything that affects the real estate market, you want to keep your clients informed of that. So that's a promise that you're making to them. And that's a promise that we should all keep. Plus, it gives another point of communication and contact to them. Any home decision, even though we're the real estate agents, we deal with a lot of things with a home, even if we're not the professional. So if they have a question about, an addition, you should be able to refer them to a contractor. If you yourself don't have a contractor, go on the group chat that we have together as Lifestyle and ask, hey, does anybody have a contractor for an addition? One of us will give you somebody, right? Somebody might have a question about insurance. Right, we go ahead, and even though we don't do the insurance, we have people that we send them to that deal with that. Whatever the question is, everything that has to do with the home, you have to explain to them. You are their go-to person. This is like I do it in two ways. One, because you're providing a service to your client, but two, if somebody wants to do a refinance down the road, they say, oh, but he was my realtor, he wasn't my lender. You want them to come to you for everything, even if you don't do it, because now you get to refer that to your lender. And you get those brownie points and that additional kind of like value that you're giving your lender so that you can continue to do business. Things of that. Now, you also tell them that I'm going to set and view the appointments. A lot of this stuff is self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go through all of it. The one part I will say, I always have this conversation with them, is what I expect from you. One is I tell them, look, please communicate with me. Tell me everything about the house. Remember that I'm not showing you a house that I'm selling. I may be the listing agent, but it's not my home. So you're not going to offend me if you tell me that you didn't like that, wood paneling. I might agree with you. So I always tell them right from the beginning, make sure you tell me everything so that I can help you. Because if you really like the house, but that wood paneling is what really skeeved you out, I'll get a quote from a contractor to remove all that wood paneling and say, look, you like the house, it's going to cost you $3,000. Would you do it? That might be the answer, right? So always tell them, communicate openly and effectively. The other thing is feedback. I always tell them, I'm a human, right? I can make mistakes. I'm also a professional running a business. I appreciate your feedback, because if what you tell me is feedback helps me improve my business, that's going to help me down the road. So I always have that conversation, and that human element to it, clients really resonate to it, because you're not just out to get them, right? You're not some big business. You're not some guy that's making all this money and you're trying to like make money off of them. You're telling them, I'm a small business. I operate my own business and I want your feedback so I can improve. That really drives home to them. Loyalty. When I talk about loyalty, what I explain to them is that sometimes clients don't know. I took this for granted a couple of times. Buyers don't always know that they need to talk to you to see a house. Sometimes I've had clients that'll call me and say, hey, I saw a lawn sign. I called the agent. They showed it to me. I love it. Can you write that offer? What happens? You run into an issue of who procured the cause, right? That other agent technically showed them the house. So you need to have that conversation right from the beginning with them, because they don't do it maliciously all the time. They just don't know any better. So you tell them, I am licensed to do real estate in the entire state. And if you're with Lifestyle, you can tell them I could do New Jersey, I could do Florida, New York, and Texas coming soon, whatever. You tell them that right from the beginning, because you want that loyalty to be explained. They can call you for any of those properties. And the last thing I tell them is like, look, I'm in this business for a long time. I'm not here for a short time. So I expect referrals when I earn them. If I do a great job for you and you hear a cousin talking about buying a house, I would appreciate if you could refer the business to me, just because I'm doing such a great job and my business runs on this, right? These are those types of conversations that sometimes could be awkward to be had, but it's part of our presentation. So this is a great platform for you guys to kind of just put it all out on the table, right? So that's kind of what I do in that portion of it. Now, this is really the meat and bones of the meeting that I have with them.
Thank God that is a yeah.
Just mute everybody here. Perfect. All right. So if you guys can see this, a couple of things that we do. One is, the first thing we want to talk about is your needs and your wishes. And I explain to the client, your needs and wishes are totally different. You might need a 3-bedroom, but you might wish for a 5-bedroom. Here's the difference. I'm not going to show you a house. If you tell me you need a 5-bedroom, I'm not going to show you a 3-bedroom house. But in reality, that 3-bedroom house could have been perfect for you, but you told me you needed 5 bedrooms. Right from the rip, I tell them that you might think that you need central air conditioning, but you actually just want that. But if you tell me you only need air conditioning, I'm only showing you guys houses that have HVAC systems. But you could have walked away from a great house that with an extra, 10K, I could have gotten you an HVAC system in there, right? So that's the big difference between needs and wishes. And we write both of them down. We try to keep the needs to the bare minimum: bedrooms, location, some sizing, right? But then the wishes, yeah, tell me everything. At the end of the day, I'm going to try to get you the most house for your budget that I possibly can. If I find you a 5-bedroom house and it's in your criteria and you only need 3 or 4, I'm still going to show that to you, and it's just an extra bedroom, right? So that's one of those conversations I have with them right from the beginning. And this is the opportunity that I get to hear how realistic they are as buyers. A lot of us don't do this before we go show houses and don't realize that we may be wasting our time, or we might not be wasting our time, but they might not understand the market. Right? If somebody starts telling me, yeah, I want a 5-bedroom home, blah, 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 and 10 minutes from the train station, but no more than 300K. At that point, I'm like, okay, let's talk about your expectations. Let's talk about reality, right? And then that's where I might show them some houses in that price point, or I might show them the house in the ideal location and show them how much it costs. This is the moment where you realize if you have somebody who's reasonable or not. A lot of us end up showing houses, maybe three outings out, and you realize that your client's not reasonable. This is a great opportunity for you to realize that right from the beginning, and to either know if you got to cut your losses and kind of walk away, or help them wrap their head around what the actual, expectation should be. The other portion of this is to meet with a lender about pre-qualifications or pre-approvals. I do these things congruently. Sometimes they come already pre-approved, but I can't really go beyond this point without those 2 things. And what I tell them is, I take a look at your qualification, your pre-approval, and I try to match your needs to your budget. That's the most important thing, is having that realization. So you need those 2 things together. From there, once we're already pre-approved and I know what you're looking for, I'll start selecting and viewing properties. And at this point, I start telling them about how that works. This conversation, I find that a lot of agents don't do it either. Some agents expect their clients to look for houses on their own and then call you when they find them. I see that all the time. I get so many clients that come to work with me that were working with a prior agent before, that they're like, oh, you're actually sending me houses. Yeah, that's our job. We look for houses. So I take this opportunity to explain to them. 1, I'm going to set up a search for you on the MLS system. That's the real estate system that we put all of our properties at. If anything meets your criteria, you will automatically get an email on a daily basis with the houses that meet that criteria. So it's like that. It's automated, and I suit that criteria for you. 2, I communicate with my fellow realtors. We have a private chat where we talk about houses before we put them on the market, and I try to find you off-market properties. So I'm always working for you things that you might not see. 3, I'm also doing searches for you in areas that maybe you didn't consider, but based on what as I'm looking at houses, and you're saying, oh yeah, I could drive 30 minutes, but you didn't consider 30 minutes north. You were only looking 30 minutes west. Maybe that's not in your search criteria, but I'll send you a couple properties, right? 4, if you see something yourself on Zillow, on Truly, on anywhere on there, send it to me. I will take a look for you and be able to schedule those for you. Here's the other thing. I don't know how many of you guys are on our LIR app, but we have an app that goes direct with the MLS now. So if you go on, well, if you don't have it, go on LIR Cloud, and there's a section on there for the app. The LIR app is phenomenal because essentially it's plugged into the MLS. And what I tell my clients is this: look, a lot of people look on Zillow, but the problem with Zillow is they put houses on there that are not really available. They'll put bank sales, they'll put foreclosures, they'll put houses that are under contract that they just want to get your information. And I explained this to them. Zillow is there to try to get your contact so that they can sell it to realtors. Now, why do I do this? Why do I bash on Zillow? Because the problem is, if your clients are looking on Zillow all the time, they're seeing at least 3 or 4 agents' pictures and phone numbers constantly at every listing. They'll see the listing agent, they'll see the 3 people that are paying in that zip code. I don't want that, right? As a realtor, you want them to only see you. If you direct them over to the LIR app, they're only going to see you. Even if you're not the listing agent, it'll only be your picture and your phone number. On our end, we can see who the listing agent is on the app. So that's why I try to get them off of Zillow and using our app. And it's important to tell them that my stuff is direct, no advertisings, nothing like that. If you go through Zillow and you submit your information by mistake, you're going to get 75 calls from somebody trying to sell you a house. So again, it's a little bit of tactical for us, but it's also the reality. There are bank own properties or foreclosures that are listed on Zillow that they don't have access to if they're doing an FHA loan. So it's true as well. So I break down how the search goes so that, again, expectations, they know what I'm looking at. I know what they expect of me. And as long as we stick to that, then there's no problem. For viewing properties, I always try to tell them right on the spot. When I talk about viewing properties, I ask them, what is your schedule? What is your schedule for viewing properties? And they'll usually tell me, oh, I work till 4 o'clock, so I can do like 5 o'clock, or weekends I could do whatever. Right then and there, write it down. Because you know how many times we might forget when somebody's available. Oh, when are you available? You can save yourself some time if you're organized in this regard. And I can then save their schedule to my contact. So I'll open their contact on my phone, and on their notes, I'll put in they're available after 3:30 and Saturdays and Sundays all day long, right? Those are the types of things that you can do to kind of save yourself some time and be a little more efficient. The other thing I inform them is sometimes the houses are occupied. So we need at least 24-hour notice. A lot of people don't know. They might be calling you and say, hey, I really want to see this house today. But in reality, you can't get in there today because there's 24-hour notice. There's coordination that has to happen. You don't want to seem like the person who's not showing the house because you're too busy, right? So you have these types of standards that you tell them. Sometimes we need at least 24-hour notice, and I need to contact the other agent, and the other agent has to get back to me after they speak to the seller. I explain that to them because it kind of creates that buffer time where you haven't heard back from me, but it's not because I'm not doing my job. There are other things involved. I like to explain that to them. So that's selecting and viewing the properties, right? The next portion is writing an offer and negotiation. I think we're going to do a whole separate training on that. We're going to go through the actual real estate contract and go through all the clauses and items that you can negotiate, because yes, you can negotiate the price, but you could also negotiate closing date. You can negotiate the terms, the deposit amount, inspections, appraisals. There's a whole bunch of things that we can negotiate. I just kind of touch on it briefly and say there's more than just price. And as your realtor, I'm going to do the best job I possibly can to negotiate on your behalf, not only for price, but also for terms. That's pretty much what I tell them at that portion. And I get into it a little bit, but I'm not going to do that at this moment. If an offer gets accepted, we start the transaction process. If an offer gets rejected, we go back to selecting and viewing. Again, this is like down to dummies, but I'll tell you, every single client I do this with, they appreciate how detailed and thorough it is. And it's, again, you build that rapport because you're teaching them. And psychologists say, anytime you help somebody, that person feels that sense of loyalty to you. So that's what I try to do anytime. Give value, give that sense of help, and that they build that loyalty back to you. And that's going to benefit you. The one caveat here, I would say anybody who's looking in from Florida, the process might be different for you at this juncture than from us. But I'm not sure how different it is. So if it is different for you guys, modify for yourselves. At this point, we do attorney review in New Jersey. So once we do attorney review, I explain to them, you don't need an attorney until your offer gets accepted. I also tell them a couple of things. One, when you sign an offer, it is not binding. Okay, that's very important to explain to them at the table, because what happens is some people get hesitant to sign a contract. They think they're signing their life away. And when you read the language, sometimes it seems like that. But if you explain to them that it's not binding, and there's an actual section in the contract that says this contract is not binding until the attorney reviews period, there's a whole paragraph for it. I explain to them right now, because guess what? I showed a house and highest and best is due by 6 o'clock, and I want to submit that offer, and I send it to them, and they're like, oh no, I got to talk to my attorney first. I don't want to sign anything without having my attorney look at it. If I didn't take the time to explain this to them at this meeting, they might be hesitant to sign. So tell them, this is not binding. If you sign this, it's just an offer. Okay, we're going to send it to the other side. If the seller signs it, it's still not binding. It's just an accepted offer. There's nothing binding about it. We can rip it up and walk away. And I point to the clause because some people are like that, and you have to understand that and deal with it. And I told them, look, after this is signed by a seller and buyer, then the attorneys look at it. And it's not until the attorney has reviewed it with you and gone back and forth with the other attorney that it actually becomes a contract. It's a hugely important conversation that I think you guys have to have at the table when you're doing the consultation. So once we're under contract, we start this. And the way I break it down to them is I tell them there's essentially 3 branches of a transaction, right? You got your lender, you got your inspections, and you got your title. And the way I see it is it looks a little complicated on the roadmap, but I always start with inspections. I tell them your lender, if you're using the right lender, your pre-qualification should be good. There are some lenders that don't fully pre-qualify, and you could start an application and then find out that they don't qualify for a loan. Thank God I work with lenders that I know that do the proper pre-qualification up front, and that's never happened to me that it goes into underwriting and the deal doesn't go through, right? But some of them don't know that. So I tell them, the only thing is when I look at a house with you, yes, I have a lot of experience, but I'm not a licensed inspector. In New Jersey, we have to have a licensed inspector do your inspection. So the first thing we're going to do, as soon as we're on the contract, we hire an inspector to come out and look at the house. So we start with the inspections. I tell them that they're going to get a report. It's going to be very long and there's going to be a lot of things on it. I also use this opportunity to preface how impactful that report might be, because a lot of buyers get kind of taken aback when they get that home inspection report. I don't know if you guys have ever dealt with that. I'm sure you have, but if you do an inspection, the inspector's all nice, talks, whatever, does their pictures, and then they get that report and they're like, what the hell? Like, this house looks like it's falling apart. I explained to him a couple things. The inspector is looking out for your best interest. So when they put language in a report, it's very strong for two reasons. One, it gives you leverage to try to negotiate for repairs. But two, it's a little CYA from the inspector. They're covering their asses to say that everything, if they see a potential issue, they gotta really emphasize it so that you don't come back and sue them later on and they never told you that there was a problem. So this is a great opportunity to explain that to them, because if not, they might get that like shock when they're looking at the report. But I do tell them that that inspection report has a lot of things, and it's a lot of things that are good, some things that are bad, some things that you just got to be aware of. Like, there's pictures on there of where the water meter is, just so you know where the shutoff valve is, right? It shows you where, you know, the roof is 10 years old, but it looks good, whatever. Like, there's a lot of information. And then typically our reports have a summary section where the inspectors mark what is important and what needs to be addressed during the transaction. So I explained that to them right then and there, because if they see a report for 90 pages, they might think, holy crap, my house is falling apart. When in reality, it's just 80 pages of information, you know, 2 pages of concerns. And then from there, we get the important stuff out of it. The next section to inspections is repairs. I explained to them that if there are issues with the inspections, you get to request repairs. They should be reasonable and they shouldn't be cosmetic. So if we see that there's scratching on the sheetrock, or, you know, the color of the room is dirty green and it made you sick, that's not a reason for you to request a new painting of the room, right? But if there's some outlets that are improperly wired, or if the window is cracked, or if there's a leak in one of the pipes in the basement, those are things that we get to ask for repairs. And the way I explain to my clients is, we make a list of items, me and you, we send it to your attorney, and your attorney will put it together in their letterhead and say, hey, Mr. Seller, these are the items, this is the whole report that we got, and these are the items that we want you to fix. And I tell them, at this juncture of the transaction, there's another negotiation that happens. The seller could say very well, yes, no problem, I'll fix all those things, they're reasonable, I'll take care of it. Very rarely does that happen. Sometimes what they end up doing is saying, yeah, I'll fix items 1, 2, and 3, but you take care of 4, 5, and 6. Or they can say, I'll give you a credit for 5,000, whatever. There's a whole bunch of different options. I explain that to them, because they sometimes get scared. If you make a request for 10 items and they come back and say, no, I'll give you $1,000, take it or leave it, they didn't know that could happen. So I explained that at this point. So we have the inspections, we request the repairs. If repairs are going to be made, we get the opportunity to re-inspect those repairs. So I tell them, you know, we'll go back into the house, either myself, or we'll ask them for receipts from licensed contractors that did the work, or we can hire the inspector to come back out for a nominal fee to come out and look at just the items that got repaired. I myself try to show them some value and like, look, I bought the outlet tester from Home Depot, right? So the same outlet tester that the inspector used to tell you that this outlet was incorrectly, I don't want you paying out of your pocket to have the inspector come back out again. I have that plug-in, I can do it myself, right? Or I tell them like, oh, there was a chimney cap that had to be installed. Maybe you can't see it for whatever reason where it is. I have a drone. I'll bring my drone out. I'll show you where the chimney, it looks like the cap was installed. There's certain things that you can do, but be very careful, because you don't want to assume that liability of you re-inspecting. You want to keep that to only like visual things, and anything that's more important, you want to tell them, I really suggest that you hire an inspector. But you also want to show some value to tell them that you're trying to save them some money. But only to the point where if you don't feel comfortable looking at something, don't do it, because you're kind of assuming liability, saying, oh, I checked it. Right? And that's not really our job. So that's pretty much the inspection contingency. So I tell them that the first thing we do is schedule the inspection. And as we start scheduling the inspection, the next thing we do is we start with the lender. So what I tell them is, you've had a pre-approval. The pre-approval just says, if you were to buy a house, you would be approved for this amount. Once we actually are under contract, then you apply for a mortgage. You haven't made an application yet. You were just asking a question. At this point, you're actually making an application. So you put them with the lender and you say to them, the first thing you got to do is finalize your mortgage application. Okay. The mortgage application is going to be a long document, bunch of stuff in there. And you tell them, you guys are going to be dealing with a lot of documents. I always tell them this from the beginning. If the lender asks you for any document, don't put that document away again, because there's the lender, there's the processor, there's the underwriter. If one person's asking for a document, keep it handy just in case you get asked for it again. That's usually saves some frustration. The mortgage application, I tell them, will take them about a day or two. And then there's a process called underwriting. So not everybody knows what underwriting is. So I try to explain it to them this way. Underwriting is taking a look at the loan program and all of the criteria that exists and checking you as a borrower to make sure that you fit that criteria. So for example, if you're doing an FHA loan, the minimum FICO, one of the criteria is 580. They're going to look and run your credit and make sure that you have the 580, right? The other criteria is that you're a first-time home buyer or don't have any other loans or mortgages to your name. They're going to check your report and see that you don't. That's essentially the process of underwriting. Here's all the lists of rules, and here's if you fit it or not. That's what underwriting is. That takes a couple of days from the lender. I explain it just as simple as that. And then when I have the lender present, sometimes I ask them to go more in depth. Again, you're just giving value. You're just explaining things to the point where it's like, it's dull. Like you're talking so much, but in reality, you say to them, I'd rather over explain to you than have you not understand something. And now I did a disservice to you. And every single one of my clients says the same thing every single time. No, I'm glad you're doing this. So trust me, it works on that. Congruent to the underwriting, we have an appraisal. This is a huge point. A lot of buyers are concerned about overpaying for a house. So you tell them you're actually protected by design in the mortgage process, because the house has to appraise for the bank to give you a loan. So I tell them, if we submit an offer for $500,000 and the house only appraises at 480, the bank is only going to loan you up to 480. Now, if you choose to pay more than that, there is an appraisal waiver, there's a gap, you can work that out. But the bank by design will have an independent party evaluate the home and determine what the actual value is. And the important keys when you talk to your client about that is you tell them that it's independent. They do not work for you. They do not work for the seller. The bank hires an independent party to come out and do that analysis. And that usually calms them down and helps them. And when I'm doing the offers, I tell them, guys, these are the comps. I think it'll appraise, but remember, you're protected by an appraisal. And that usually helps calm the client and you overcome those objections. After you do that, you get an approval and there's some conditions involved, which again, this is a simple process, simplified version of the process. So we don't have to really get in there. There's a little disclaimer here that I put. The flow chart summarizes the steps involved in the home buying process. There are a lot of details to be handled when purchasing a home. Those details do not get discussed at this meeting. There's no way I can cover all of that, but I want to give you an overview of the process. It's important to say that because if you miss something, they're like, oh, you never told me about this, right? So you tell them, look, that was the nitty gritty. That's the stuff we don't really get into. But I always tell them inspections first, lender second. When you get to the approval portion, that's typically where the title company comes in. Title is typically like a dull subject. So the way I explain it to them is the title is, piece of paper that says this is your property. And with title, there could be things called liens. And with liens, I look at them as sticky notes. Let's say there's a mortgage on the house for $150,000. That's a sticky note that goes on your deed. Okay. Let's say that you did some work and you didn't pay the contractor. The contractor filed a mechanic's lien on your house. There's a $50,000 lien on it. The title company's job is to go in and search the public record to see what are these stickies. And they want to make sure that those stickies get removed at the closing before they hand you the deed. That way, when you get the deed, it's a clean piece of paper, right? So that's pretty much my basic title for dummies explanation to buyers of what it does. Obviously, it's an oversimplification, but it's enough to let them know. So I tell them that they search title, they get all that information, and then they issue them a title commitment, which is a policy. And I tell them it's insurance. It says to you, you're going to pay a fee now, but no other liens are going to pop up. And if some lien does pop up on the house, then you're not responsible for it because you have this insurance. You pay for it one time at the closing. It's good for the life of how long you own that property and the mortgage. So I tell them, if somebody comes out of the woodwork and says, oh, that person owed me X amount of money, you don't have to deal with that. You send it to the title company handles it. And if they were wrong, the title company has to pay from the insurance. Or if they were, if they were right, then they have the burden to prove why that person is not owed that money. So that's pretty much what I explained with that. And the last thing is the survey, right? It's the physical drawing of the property. I tell them sometimes the issues with surveys is that you might see a house and it's all fenced like a rectangle, but that doesn't mean that that's where the property line is. That property might run off to the side. I had a house that I was representing the seller, and they had a fence straight, but in reality, the property line went off to the side, and the neighbor had a pool inside the property line of the house that we were selling. Yet the buyer's agent never reviewed that survey. The buyer's attorney never reviewed that survey with the client till we got to the day of the closing. And I'm looking at the survey and I'm like, holy crap, this deal's about to fall apart. Because I'm not, if I was a buyer's agent, I'm not letting them close with that pool on the property, right? Or the fence like cut like that. The buyer's agent didn't say a damn thing. I'm representing the seller at the table, so I have to represent the seller's best interest. I just kept my mouth shut and went with it. But the attorney and the buyer's agent should have stopped the sale at that point. Because what happens is, yes, technically that's your property and they're not supposed to have that pool on there. But guess what? What I explain to my client, I tell them that story, the cautionary tale, every single time I do it. What happens is, one, God forbid somebody drowns in that pool, it's technically on your property, right? Whether you know it or not, it's on your property. Two, the insurance, like issues that you could have from it. Three, even if you do go, you have the survey, you go to your neighbor, hey neighbor, I just moved in next door. By the way, get that thing off my property, right? That's actually mine. Guess what? You're not starting a good relationship with your neighbor. And then four, what if they say, no, I don't want to remove it? You can't just take it down. You have to go through a court process to actually enforce that. You don't want to have to deal with that. So that's why you get a survey. It's to protect you from that. Again, a lot of my conversations with the client, they're anecdotes. They're stories about transactions that I've had where this mattered, right? Like situation with title where there was, you know, a brother and that brother didn't get paid and they, whatever, like there's all these different stories that we could tell about why all of this is built around. What I do is essentially I tell them when all these three things get done, we come together, we get the loan funding and the keys are released to your home. This is an oversimplification of things, but in reality, this whole process is meant to protect you. That's the key phrasing word that I say to them. This whole buying process is meant to protect you. You're protected on the value through appraisal. You're protected on the condition of the home through inspections. You're protected on legal responsibilities through title. You're protected on physical conditions through survey. This whole process is designed to protect you. I am your realtor. I am the guide through the process. Even if I'm not doing the individual things, think of me as the center of the wheel. And when you're dealing with me, I'll put you off with whoever is responsible, but you always come back to me, right? That's how I explain my role to them. And man, ever since I started doing this, the trust that I get from the client, like they're like, yeah, you got me. Like, because you explain all that, I don't even have to worry about it. You know what you're doing. You're going to guide me through this process. This, to me, was game changer when I started doing it. I never lost another buyer again. I mean, I went on vacation and I couldn't get somebody to cover. They would wait for me 2 weeks. Obviously, you don't want to be in that situation. You want to have a team or other agents to help. But what I'm saying is that's how strong this is. This is a very powerful tool for you to build that rapport and that trust with your clients. So that's pretty much what the meat of the presentation that I do with them. There's another section here where I kind of write this out. I'm not going to go through it in the training because it's very drawn out, but essentially I talk about the different things like the condition of the property affects the price, how long it's been in the market affects the price, activity. There's a lot of things that you can really get into the nitty gritty. I'm just going to give you guys a copy of this. You can read it on your own. And then I kind of close it out with kind of some like frequently asked questions. So, you know, how does the FSBO work? Once my offer is accepted, what do I do? All these different things. Take some time to read through it and really apply it. But I don't get into this in the meeting with them because I just spent probably 30 minutes really going through that process with them, right? The final thing that I do, if we look back to the agenda, we talk about the closing costs and down payment, monthly payments, things like that. I always have a copy or a sample of a Alta or a HUD from a recent closing. And I like to explain those closing costs. So I'll do this with you guys now, just so that if you already know how the closing cost works, great. Maybe if you hear something the way I explain it, it might help you. If you have no idea how closing costs work, then this can help you guys a little bit. As far as the monthly payment, one of the reasons why I asked the lender to be there is I asked them to give a scenario. I said, okay, well, look, you guys are looking for this house. I think that in that city with those amount of bedrooms, that house costs about $450,000. And the taxes in that city are about, let's say, $8,000. So I asked the lender, hey, can you run a quick scenario for them of how much it would be? And they give them a breakdown and I explain to them, you know, what principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, the pity payment, right? So they give that breakdown and now they have an idea. Because when they get a pre-approval, it doesn't always have that monthly payment. It usually just has the total. We're approved for $600,000. But what does that mean, right? One of the things I tell them is the real important number is that monthly payment, because a lot of people don't end up paying the balance of their home. On average, in New Jersey, people sell their home every 12 years. That's the average, right? So if I tell you, look, you're getting a mortgage for $600,000, but on average, you're going to sell at 12. What's really the more important thing? It's really your monthly payment. That's what you care about the most. So I have the lender break that down. I do it sometimes too, but you're not really qualified to do that. It's really the lender that does it. The closing cost is something that I do go into. So here's the closing costs for a transaction that I had. This was March 11th, 2022. So not that long ago. I try to keep something in the last like year, because if you have things from a couple years ago, things change, laws change, different fees, taxes, things like that. So I break it down. I explain to them how one side is the seller, one side is the borrower. So in this particular case, we're looking at the borrower side, and I explain to them every single line item, right? So the sale price of the property was $440 in this case. The loan amount was $418. Why? Because they put a deposit. I explained to them that comes out of the deposit that they put down, goes against the price of the house. Because sometimes they don't understand that there is cash to close includes your down payment plus your closing costs, right? So there's a portion where you start talking about the numbers where you really have to start telling them both of those numbers together are all here. This is a summary of the entire transaction. So I explained that to them. Prorations and adjustments. The way I explain this to them is a lot of people, I've had situations where they tell me that they think it's better to close in a certain part of the month. They'll say, oh, I want to close at the end of the month, or I want to close in like August because I heard that's better than closing in July. I don't know if you guys have heard that before, but I've gotten that before. And I try to explain to them, honestly, it doesn't matter when you close. You're always going to pay whatever you were going to pay. It just depends on how you're going to pay it. You either pay it at the closing to the title company, or they're going to get you for it in the escrow, or you're going to pay it straight. Like, it doesn't matter when you close. You're always going to pay whatever you're going to pay. So prorations just depend on what date you pay. So what I explain to them is, look, the taxes are due in New Jersey every quarter, right? So February 1st, May 1st, August 1st, and November 1st. So what I tell them is, if you are closing, so now we're in August, the seller of the house just paid their taxes for August, September, and October on October 1st, right? So if you're closing in the middle of the quarter, you have to reimburse the seller for the portion that they already paid for that remaining of the quarter. Okay, this is something that not a lot of realtors know, but for us, I feel like our job is to understand these things, because when our clients have questions about it, you should have an intelligible conversation about it. So a proration just means if you're closing in the middle of the quarter, you got to reimburse the seller for the portion of taxes they already paid. So right here, the city taxes, it's going to debit you $648 and it's going to credit them $648. That's pretty much what it is, because they take the quarter divided by the amount of days, and then whatever days they already paid for, you reimburse them for. The next portion here, there's loan charges. So the bank will have their own charges. In this case, there were points involved to buy down the rate. So you explain to them, whatever the rate is, you can keep it as it is, or you have the option to pay points to lower your rate. And that helps you over the life of the loan. And at this point, you can ask the lender to kind of hop in and explain to them how points work, but you should at least know what it is and what it's used for. And then I explained to them that there's also things on here that are called POC, paid outside closing. So an appraisal fee of $575 was paid outside the closing. But this is the statement of everything that had to do with this transaction. So even though it was paid outside the closing, it goes on here. It's not on a column, so it doesn't get added to the bottom line number, but it does show that it was paid outside the closing. So that's important to explain to them. Prepaid interest. So if they're closing on March 11th, they're not collecting a mortgage payment for them, not on April 1st, on May 1st. April 1st is kind of part of like the loan, right? So doesn't mean that they're getting away with not paying interest. You're paying interest no matter what day you close. So from March 11th to April 1st, they prorate what that interest would be. Here it says $44.38 per day. So in total, you're paying $931 at the closing to pay for the rest of that month's interest. So again, I explained this to them because some people think it's better to close on some day. You're always going to pay it no matter what. So I explained that part. Loan charges and credit report fee. You know, I just tell them there's some basic fees that you're always going to have to pay. In this case, they charge $68 for the loan. Impounds. So the impounds, I tell them, is essentially they're not fees. They're really your money that the bank is holding for you. Okay. And this is the best way I can explain it. The bank at the closing is going to open up a checking account for you, or savings account, whatever it is. It's an account for you. And they're going to hold some of your money for the purposes of paying certain things. So in this case, the homeowner's insurance, they're asking for 3 months of impounds. So your homeowner's insurance was a total of X amount for the year. They divide that by 12, and that's a total of, in this case, $56.59 per month. And they're asking for 3 months of that. Why? Because what happens is you pay every month, and then at the end of the year, when the insurance lapses, the company, the mortgage company, pays that on your behalf. But they don't want to have that at zero. So they're always going to have a little bit of a cushion in there. So they're asking for 3 months right now. when next year the insurance comes in, if the price went up a little bit, they have a little bit in that account. If they stay the same, they just pay that amount. And it's not like you're losing this money. I tell them, whatever you're putting into this impound, when you're done paying your mortgage or you sell the house, whatever is left in that escrow account gets reimbursed to you. So they're just holding your money. So don't think about it as a fee. They're just holding on to your money. That's important to explain to them. The other part is the property taxes. Again, I explained to them it's paid every quarter. But if you're closing on March 11th here in this case, and the taxes are due on May 1st, they're not collecting a monthly payment from them on April 1st. The first payment they're collecting is May 1st. So if you're closing now and the first payment they're getting from you is May 1st, they're not collecting any money from you, but they have to pay the taxes at that point. So they're asking them right now at the closing for 3 months of property taxes to escrow. Why? Because by the time you make your first payment, the first 3 months are already due. So that's why you're doing it. You're paying it here into that account, and then they'll pay it from there. So again, it doesn't matter when you close. You're always going to pay for it at one point. The next section is a category called title charges and escrow fees. I tell them that title for the most part is standard, and there's a bunch of little fees that involve the searches. The bigger fees are the insurance or the policy and the settlement fee. So you'll see that because they're the people that handle all of the closing transactions, like I tell them, your title company is your settlement fee as well. So what that means is that you are trusting that they're going to disperse all the payments to everybody that's needed. They're not going to the mortgage company is not going to hand the seller the money and hope that the seller pays their outstanding or former mortgage. The mortgage company sends the money to the title company, and the title company sends the old balance to the old mortgage company to pay and make sure that it all gets settled. That's a very important function. That's why there's a fee involved to handle all those little things. I explained to them the title company pays the commissions, title company pays the attorneys, everything that has to get paid, the title company handles it. But for that, they charge a fee. That's what that settlement fee is. And then the other big thing is the policy, which I believe it's later on in the HUD. Here it has the attorney's fee. If you see a B on an Alta or a HUD, B refers to buyer. If you see an S, S refers to seller. So the attorney fee for the buyer is there. That's the fee. And then you'll see the other attorney fee, which is an S. Anything that's on your column obviously belongs to the buyer. Here's the owner's title insurance, which is the other portion that I was telling you guys is bigger. And I tell them all the time, it's based off of the purchase price and it's regulated. So it's not like you're going to get one title company that's going to charge you a lot more money than another title company. So that's kind of how I explain that to them. The last thing I explain with the government and recording fees, I tell them, look, congratulations, you just bought a house. But what happens is now they have to record that for everybody to know. But they record two things. They record your fee, your deed, which is you as an owner, but they also record your mortgage so that everybody knows that, yeah, you own the house, but you owe this property. This is how title companies find the liens, because they get recorded. You have to pay for that recording. So that's what that recording fee is there. And then down in the miscellaneous portions, some people pay for their homeowner's insurance before the closing, and they just have to provide a receipt. Some people pay for it at the closing. So in this case, the homeowner's insurance was paid at the closing. The total amount was there, and then the title company sends that check to the insurance company. Survey fee is obviously, like I said, for survey, it goes right on there. So again, the important thing to explain to your client is all of these fees, I want to explain to you what they are. I can't control them. And they also depend on when you close. For example, if you close in the middle of the month, you might need 3 months of escrows. If you close in the beginning of the quarter, you might only need 2 months of escrows. So I can't give you upfront what an estimated closing cost is going to be, because there's a lot of variables. But as long as they understand what they are, they're usually pretty comfortable with it. Now, again, guys, you should really take some time to look at it on your own, because just talking about it is like, it's like all these numbers and all these different things. So what I like to do is have this in front of them, have the actual HUD in front of them so that they can see it, and then have a copy of it in the guide that I give them. So when I give them this, I give them the cover letter, I give them the whole guide, and then I give them a copy of one so that they can take it home. So all in all, when I meet with them, I give them a lot of information. And my goal is always to say, look, I'm going to give you a lot more than what you need, but I'd rather you have more information than less, because I want to do a good job in representing you. And from that, they usually take away like, okay, this guy's looking out for me, and I know I'm in good hands. So that's pretty much what I do with a buyer consultation session. Again, it's a lot of information, it's a lot of rapport building. And the final step, like the way I close these things out, is like, okay, let's talk about the next steps. When can I show you your properties first? Are you ready to buy now? Do you have something that you need to sell? Are you renting? When's your lease up, right? These are the types of questions where I just gave you all this information. Now let's transition as to like, what's next? If you have a lease, are you waiting for that lease to expire, right? Is your lease up in November? Because if it's August and I'm looking for houses right now, most people want you to close in 30 to 45, 60 days. So we might be too early for you. Or let's say if you break your lease, what happens? Have you had the conversation with your landlord? Is your landlord okay as long as you give them 2 months notice? Or do you lose your security deposit? Are you willing to lose the security deposit, right? Because sometimes they'll be willing to lose $3,000-$4,000 if it means getting them the right house right now, right? Those are conversations that are also had at the buyer consultation meeting. And then the next step is I set up the home search. So after they leave, I have all my notes. I go on the MLS, I do my search, I set it up with their email immediately. So that way the next day they're already getting properties from me. And then I start looking at the active in the market and email them as well. Any questions from anybody here or anybody on the Zoom about this? Again, yeah. Do I use buyer agency agreements? I don't make them do a buyer agency agreement. Personally, I know a lot of brokers recommend it. And on that question, this is just what I do, right? There's a lot of ways that people do different things. I'm not saying my way is the right way. I'm just saying this has worked for me. I will say that there are scenarios where I would tell somebody to use a buyer agency agreement. If you're having a conversation with a buyer and they're like, yeah, I was working with this agent and then I went to work with this agent and then that agent wasn't, and like you see that they're jumping around, to protect yourself, you either want to not work with them or maybe say, look, I'm going to take a lot of time. I'm going to fix all the mistakes. I'm going to do everything the right way, but I'm going to ask you to sign this for me because this is going to protect my time with you. It's an awkward conversation. I typically don't have it, but there are scenarios where you might want to have them use it. Let me see. I got a couple of questions here on the chat. Awesome. No problem. In what moment do you sign the buyer agreement? This would be a great moment. If you do buyer's agreements, this would be a great moment to have them sign your buyer's agreements because you're sitting with them, you spend some time with them, and you could have it right there in person. This would be a good moment for that. The other thing I will say is that these meetings, they might take 30 to 60 minutes from your day, but I'd rather spend this 30 and 60 minutes and have a real buyer in front of me than 60 minutes driving and showing them 3-4 properties and then they end up not being real or unreasonable. I'd rather spend this time and not waste my time later on because I don't know right there, I know at the table if they're real or not, right? Any other questions?
How would you advise an agent that may be, taking on clients from like paid leads? So like, let's say for instance, it's a little client.
Yeah.
And that client is called on a specific property.
So
do you think it's good, or like what's the best transition
to it
from that property to being able to get them to agree to kind of sit down with you and do a consultation?
Yeah. So the question was, what do I advise to agents that are taking on paid leads? So essentially like a Zillow lead that comes in and they want to see a house, right? I would not recommend to say, hey, before I show you the house, I got to sit down for you for an hour to do a consultation. That I wouldn't do. Paid leads are a different animal because you have them on the phone. They don't know who you are. It's very cold. I think that the best way to handle a paid lead is to give them what they want right away, get in front of them as soon as you can. So somebody called in on this property, I answer the phone. Hello, this is George. Oh, you want to see 122 Main Street? All right, the 6 o'clock tomorrow work for you? All right, cool, I'll see you there. Like right away, make the appointment, get in front of them. Again, that's the type of situation where you need to get in front of them and kind of build that rapport. However, as soon as I do get in front of them and I show them the house, I don't press them. I give them what they want because they want to see the property. I schedule that, I show it to them, and I ask them questions to try to build rapport. And then I'm like, hey, how long have you been looking? Has anybody ever sat down and gone over the process with you? Do you know what your closing costs look like? No, actually, no. Everybody just comes and shows me the house and that's it. And that's probably why they keep jumping from person to person because they think all we do is open doors. So yes, I want to go and open that door, give them what they need. But the same token is like, look, what are you doing tomorrow at 3 o'clock? You got an hour to come and just sit down and I'm going to explain the process to you, answer all the questions that you might have. I hit them with that in person, but definitely if you have a paid lead, you want to schedule that appointment and just get in front of them. Create as little of an obstacle as possible to them. Any other questions? Okay. On that note, I think that anybody that you're currently working with, any buyers, really take the time to sit down with them and go over this stuff. Even if you've already showed them properties, just be like, hey, I sent you more houses. Let me know if you have any questions. By the way, I'd love to sit down with you. And oh, here's another thing I didn't say. I always tell people, bring any decision makers, because sometimes it's that one person on the pre-approval, but if somebody's going to be involved with that decision, there might be a, a sister, there might be a dad, a husband, wife, whatever it might be. You want to sit down with all the decision makers, because those are the people that you're talking to your client, but they're the ones that are talking in their ear, and you want to win them over as well. So this is a great opportunity. I have tons of dads, specifically when I deal with like people coming in from New York, that they're, they come in like to the home inspection, they're making sure that they're not getting taken advantage of. They look at agents the same way. They want to make sure they're not being taken advantage of. So if I sit down with the dads and I impress them and I show them how much I'm doing for their kids or whatever the case might be, I've won them over. Those clients are going nowhere without me, to look at the properties, you give the app to the buyers. Yeah, so through the LIR app, if you guys already have the LIR app, I'm just gonna open it and kind of show you guys. So this is the LIR app here. At the bottom, there's a section that says account, right? And then here under account, there's a section that says invite friends. Should really say clients, but you hit invite friends. You can share a link, you can send them the email, you could give a QR code, you can invite a contact right from here. So so LIR app, at the bottom it says account, and then it says invite friends. I send them the link from there to the email, and then from there they sign up. And then here's the really cool thing. I have one client I just put on, and you could actually, if you go to alerts at the bottom where it says alerts, you can see their activity. So my client just favorited a listing at 316 Green Street. So I can see that she just looked at one and liked it. So now I can go on there and actually click on it and schedule my appointment. So the cool thing is it shows you what they're looking at and how to do it. So if you need the LIR app, go on lircloud.com. There's a section on there that says MLS app, I think it's called, on the LIR Cloud. All right, guys. So I'm gonna share this. Probably have this uploaded. When I upload the training, I'll upload an attachment to it with my guide. And if you guys need any help, we can I can help you guys kind of customize it to your own. If you're not good with computers, or if you don't have the apps for it, I can help you do it. Thank you guys so much. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye. All right.
Bye, George.